Can you hear me? Okay, so I think we can get started. Oh, sorry. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us in today's sessions on bridging the gaps highlighted in the global stocktake, scalable solutions for NDC implementation that deliver locally led adaptation results. This session is being organized by the UN Capital Development Fund through the local facility in partnership with the governments of Malawi, Liberia, and the Gambia today, and of course, hosted by the NDC partnership here in Dubai. So welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us in today's session. So basically the global stocktake is a process for countries, to really understand the progress which is being made so far in terms of achievement of the Paris Agreement goals. And then we are now in this process of understanding the first stocktake. But what is clear from this first report is that we are not on track to achieve the targets of keeping temperatures on 1.5 degrees. And what is a bit even more worry is that the window for meaningful action is closing. And that means that action needs to take place now, and so we need to get all the support that we need to really scale up solutions that will help the world in keeping and achieving those targets under the Paris Agreement. The same report also identifies several gaps in the GST in terms of adaptation, action, but also in means of implementation, which also includes finance. And you may recall that the recent UNEP Adaptation Gap report, which was published just before COP, really highlighted the widening gap in terms of adaptation finance. That is widening, and it's bigger than we previously thought, and somehow the needs of the adaptation finance needs could vary in the range of 194 to 366 billion per year. So the figures are really massive, and if we continue this trajectory, we may not be able to achieve those goals. There has been a series of high-level events hosted by here, of course, at COP, by the first Global Stocktake High-Level Committee, where they gathered world leaders to emphasize the importance of comprehensive, transformational, multi-sectoral, whole-of-society responses to climate action. At the same time, ensuring equitable transitions, leaving one behind, and also, of course, aligned with efforts for development and poverty eradication. But of course, we have now an opportunity to really course correct this trajectory and really accelerate ambitions towards the next round of revision of the national determined contributions, which is due in 2025. Really highlighting bringing climate action to the local and community level, where climate actions are most needed. Because when we think about adaptation, it's really local, and especially for the countries which are most vulnerable, like the lower income countries in Africa, in Asia, and in the Pacific. I mean, the adaptation is a must, and finance is not flowing to the local level as it should be, or at least not in a substantial manner and a simplified and regular manner. So we need to somehow address this issue. But the good news is that we already know that there are solutions which have been tried and tested, and these are ready to be scaled up. And now the challenge is, how do we then build a coalition that really support to really scale up these solutions which already exist. So we don't need to reinvent the wheels. The solutions are out there. They need scalability. And this is the case of the local facility, which is designed by the UN Capital Development Fund, of course, which has 12 years of experience really channeling finance all the way down to local governments for investments in local adaptation, which is also aligned with national agreed goals. So this is just one of the solutions that could be used to really increase ambition in this sense. And then to reflect on these issues and the gaps, highlighted in the first global stocktake, we have then invited here a very distinguished panel that I would like to invite to take their seats here. We have Mr. Jefferson Nandibo, who is the head of multilateral environmental agreements at the Environmental Protection Agency from Liberia. Please, Mr. Nandibo. Mr. Landin Sane, who is the chairman of Mansa Konko Area Council from the Gambia. And we also have Mr. Evans Njewa, who is the Chief Environment Officer for Climate Change from Malawi. He's caught up in another ceremony. He's just taken up the chairmanship of the LDC group, and then he will join us as soon as that meeting finishes. So he will be joining us very soon. But before we turn to our panelists today, I would like just to share a video on some of the actions that which have been implemented so far by the local facility. So just to set the scene, please.
Countries across the world are coming together as part of the local climate adaptive living facility. From Africa, developing and least developed countries, small island developing states, united in action on adaptation to the climate crisis. And the situation has never been more urgent. Climate shocks are increasingly common and devastating. Communities are under threat. Livelihoods and lives are being lost. The regions that contributed the least to global warming have limited resources to deal with its consequences. They need finance. The Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility, or LOCAL, addresses this urgent need. Designed by UN Capital Development Fund over 10 years ago, LOCAL is an internationally recognised and standard mechanism for channeling climate finance to communities, for adaptation that is transforming economies and lives. LOCAL brings together over 30 countries from Africa, Asia, the Caribbean and Pacific. Their shared goal: effective and sustainable adaptation that is resilient, locally led, and puts communities first. Action at the international level with LOCAL brings countries together for shared learning, advocacy, and action. Climate change is a global challenge, but its impacts are experienced locally, where we work, where we go to school, where we live our lives. With LOCAL, the countries and communities on the climate change front line are taking the lead. The systems for climate finance delivery are in place. It's time to take LOCAL adaptation to scale. LOCAL, financing locally led adaptation.
Yeah, so these are just one of the solutions that could be readily available to really help governments in taking additional more ambition and more action for locally led adaptation. So now I would like to open the discussions today, and perhaps I would start with Mr. Jefferson from Liberia. So I know that Liberia has published in 2022 its revised NDC implementation plan. And I also know that that plan also places great emphasis on the role of local stakeholders, including also local governments in that process, to really help the government achieve its goals under the NDC, under the country NDC. So could you perhaps kindly share with us some of how experience from Liberia on how it intends to use mechanisms such as LOCAL, for instance, to bridge the gaps in terms of enhanced climate action at the local level, or how do you see how the local level action is perceived in those plans for Liberia? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Raphael, and good afternoon to the colleagues in here. As you rightly said, adaptation is a very big issue for all of us. Graciously, the GST was able to highlight our progress, not just in adaptation, but cutting across the entire climate change fight. So the fact that this, the first GST have indicated that much is not being done means that a lot more effort needs to be applied. And you just stated here that we are going to be challenged with mobilization of resources. But The most vulnerable group of it is the least developed countries, countries with economy in transition, small island states, and the rest of it. Now, if you look at our Liberia revised NDC, 85% is contingent on funding support. 15% is domestic. With the scarcity of resources, financial resources, how do we meet our targets? It's worrisome for all of us. Secondly, if you heard the other day at one of the side events when my boss indicated that, look, UNCDF, those of us or those who are the key global players will have to agree with us as vulnerable communities that UNCDF is not a competitive institution. It's not competing with any of them. It's not trying to take space that is occupied by any of the existing financing mechanisms. We don't see UNCDF as competing with GEF or competing with GCF or other funding windows. We see UNCDF as a direct mechanism to support the most vulnerable people. So if you ask a question, the impact that you are going to make on us as a country, there are several. We have very low capacity. We need to strengthen our capacity. We need, like any other country, to cut across countries for best practices that we can be able to introduce to see how we can also be able to adapt to the most unforeseen circumstances. And so the intervention of local for us, we see it as very significant because we are a country that went into civil conflict for more than 20 years. Our governance system is still under reconstruction. We have a centralized government. We have not been able to source funding for local government elections. This means that everything about us for now is within a central circle. And we have continued to say, and I'm very certain that this is not just dynamic to Liberia. Unless we can change our approaches of how we engage and intervene in some of the given circumstances in our respective countries, the vulnerable communities will continue to remain very, very vulnerable from climate change impacts. If you take some of our profiles, you see what annual declaration of climate finance that flow through our countries is amazing. But the impact on the local people, is very nominal. All right? And they are the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable and affected group of people. So local is a mechanism for us as a country, believing that the way for our vulnerable people, communities, to have a fair share of climate finance is to reach directly to them. The third issue you will raise is awareness. Besides those of us who cannot cope and those of us who are seated in high offices in government, how many of these vulnerable people actually know what climate change is, what its impacts are, unless when it have occurred? Do they know whether there are adaptive measures to take? No. So they need localized education. We need to reinforce local institutions that will support us to be able to get the messages across. If you look at our NDC, I will reference again. The development of our NDC cut across national institutions. We took into account gender balance. We went to civil society. We went as far as the disabled. And then we even convened regional meetings, from clan, district, regional meetings, to be able to construct the NDC so that everybody cutting across our sector can be heard. Their voices can be incorporated. That was one of the reasons why our NDC was around 5 sectors. The current NDC took into consideration 9 sectors, the lead of which is agriculture, because that's where they are. That's where they make their basic livelihood, and that's where most of the destructive action of climate change is being generated. Because we are a rainforest nation, but mind you, I've always told people, that whenever you are favored, life is about two things. When the better side of life is, begin to calculate for the wrong side. Because eventually, no matter how long you live, you are one day going to die. So if you are living and you forget about death, I mean, it's a waste of time. No one among us, not a single country could imagine that you could wake up and see a deserted country like Libya losing over 20,000 human beings in less than 30 minutes. So now because my country is a rainforest nation, I will forget that one day drought could pass my way. One day there could be drought to affect us. Who knows? Because the world is changing rapidly and at a speed that is unimaginable. So trust me, the GST is an indicator that we are doing, but we are not doing as we agreed to do. So we need to buckle up. And UNCDF, when I asked the question the other day, I went to our panel that, hey, the loss and damage fund is being seated in the World Bank. Well, what's the linkage between the seating of the fundings there and the UNCDF in terms of implementation? Because we are still afraid. I'm writing one proposal to go to GCF or to go to JEF, and it takes 2 years to review, and then they come back to me and say, your proposal is hereby disqualified. Then I have to be taking another 2 years. By the time we can agree that the proposal is being approved for Liberia, the damage is already done. So if I have one institution that come on the ground and takes 6 months to answer to my plea and reply my proposal as to whether we can start directly to the most affected and vulnerable people, I'd rather choose that. So, I mean, it's a lot to talk about, but from the onset, let me just rest until we pick up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing some important reflections. And I think you touched also on very important aspects in terms of gaps, technical gaps at the local level, financial gaps. This issue of access requirements that we have seen, you just mentioned now in terms of accessing vertical funds, which from our experience, we have been supporting several countries in access directly, GCF or other vertical funds, and it's really a challenge. And as you said, by the time you get the funding, perhaps the plans have changed and people have gone. So it's really, really an issue that needs to be addressed as we are to achieve the goals here under the Paris Agreement. So now I would like to turn to London, who is, as I said before, the chairman of the Mansa-Konko area in the Gambia, who is one of the councils in the country who have been implementing these performance-based grants for 4 or 5 years for now. And then there's a lot of experiences, from the ground, from the experience, in bringing local finance to using these government systems in the country and, work directly with communities. And I know that, Mr. Landy, you also brought a video to show us a bit of the work that, his area council is also doing in that country. So if you could maybe play the second video, please.
We're in the Gambia. Sarata Cisse and her daughter Awa are going to the health centre in Pakali Bar. Thanks to a new culvert, it's a short walk from their home in the village of Barakunda. But until recently, this was a journey fraught with danger. In the rainy season, these fields become swampy and the river difficult to cross. Speaking in Wolof, she remembers a time when Awa fell ill one night. Putting Awa on her back, she set off through the rain on foot, determined to reach the health centre. The river was up to her knees and she was scared she would fall into the water, where crocodiles are known to hide.
This was a major challenge for the women, for the community of Pakaliwa and the surrounding. It's because of the nature of the road and the swamp area, the water there, they cannot pass in easily. It breaks their social life. It denies them from access their health facility, which is very paramount. And if it denies them, they cannot access in the school.
It was so risky before, because it may cause delays, like a delay in seeking healthcare.
Climate change, with its spells of intense and unpredictable rainfall, has changed the environment around Pakali Bar and the river. At times, the waters are fast flowing, deep and difficult to cross.
according to the history way back, the situation was not like this. But it's getting worse because of the impact of climate change. The flow of water, as we've visited there, the water is still going on. And with that, the place is getting deeper and deeper, and they can no more access it. So the situation is getting worse before the coming of these years of intervention.
Before the culvert, the only other option was to take the circuitous route to the clinic. This involved a long walk to the main road and a ride in a taxi or on a donkey cart, a cost few residents here can afford. Sarata Cisse has already lost one child. Her daughter, Awa, had been born a twin. She is proud that she took part in the construction of this culvert. It's a climate-resilient solution that will ensure she and other women in her community can access health services more easily. Following community consultations, residents decided to construct the culvert using a grant from the local Climate Adaptive Living Facility with funds from the European Union. Community members, including Sarata Cisse, did much of the hard work, carrying water, mixing cement. For their labours, they received a daily wage, a welcome boost to household incomes. The culvert and associated flood-retaining dike has improved access to healthcare, schools and markets for Sarata Cisse and her neighbours in Barakunda and the nearby community of Sutukum.
So now they can easily use this back way from Pakaliwa to Barakunda or Sutukum, which is about 4 kilometers.
Thanks to this climate-resilient investment, more pregnant women are seeking the antenatal care they need to keep themselves and their babies healthy.
Now that they can easily walk from Barakunda to Pakali without paying any fares, that definitely have made the healthcare more accessible to them. So like they can come at any time. So that has increased our patient flow at the outpatient department.
And by using the inclusive local approach, local governments worked with community members to deliver long-lasting results.
It's very important for local government to work with people. It's people who know what they are feeling and they know what they want. And if you give me what I want, I'll be able to take care of it. It's not going to be like you impose it on me. They will jealously guide it to make sure it's sustained. This is important why local governments always involve people to do their own plan and initiative and implement themselves. It's a very good approach. Instead of top-bottom approach, now it's bottom-up. Local approach works very well. It works.
Local, financing locally led adaptation.
Thank you so much for sharing these, experiences from the ground. I think it's really inspiring. So maybe just, taking on the experience that you just showed here to us, perhaps could you maybe expand a bit more on how of the positive impacts that you have experienced in your area council, and somehow trying to link or maybe your views on how do you think this work that you have been doing under your council area can also inform national agreed goals of the Gambia in terms of how the government can use this work to somehow report back on achievements of the NDCs at the national level. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator Rafael, for the wonderful moderation. And let me recognize my colleague here from Liberia and our colleague to come from Malawi and the good audience here with us. I think the video has really spoken a lot about what obtains in the Gambia, and specifically in my own area that I had as the head of the area, as the chairman, or mayor if you like. Talking about the question that is being asked, I think the video is one of that benefits or impact that the intervention of the project could do. But there are other far-reaching, or there are many other benefits and important impacts that actually has been realized in the lives of the people. Like you can see in the video where women were collecting stones, you know, and participating in the daily works. And it's not for free. The project gives them wages. And these wages become income for the women and youth, who are the primary targets of the project. And in which case it contributes in local economic development or household economic or revenue. And that will in turn trickle down to household food security for the students or for the children of the beneficiaries. They can pay their children's school fees out of that. But again, you've just seen one culvert here. There are many other culverts, you know, that that were constructed. In other areas, it's like it creates access for to markets. Like in my area, we have a weekly market called Lumo. This is a very common and very interesting Lumo day, market day, when communities will come from far and near to go and buy some of their needs for the week. And even some come from across the border from Senegal. So we have some culvert constructed in some strategic communities that create that access. So you see economic and commercial activities will be enhanced, and that has contributed a lot. You go to some other communities like solar lighting system for street lights, where there is no connection to the national grid, to the electricity grid from the National Electricity Company. And this all enhance the ease of life for people of my area. But it's, again, the process of the women and youth participating in this project or in the intervention enhance their skills in various ways as well. You could see they were collecting stones, but they will now go mix cement with sand and even participate in construction. So before the end of these interventions, they will in one way or the other learn some various skills, of which even after the project life cycle, they will use as a skill to gain employment or wages from. So it is a non-stop intervention. As long as we are picking up, we believe that even after the project cycle, the benefits of the project will continue and the spirit of the project will continue. And I think he already had mentioned, even before I should say it, the government, because of the efficiency and the benefits of this project, the impact it has created, government is trying to see how it continues with the approach by committing some funds from the local budget, from the national budget, to continue with the approach of the local. So, and with the youth as well, it has contributed a lot in reducing this illegal migration, or what we call the back way to Europe or Americas, where we have young people, you know, go into the seas to cross to the Mediterranean, to either Spain, Italy, or others, because there is an alternative means to get income. So it has contributed a lot. And with the council, my council being a partner to the project, my staff skills have been enhanced in terms of identification of projects, implementation of projects, reporting, and even audits. Because all these exercises are systematic in the project. They all happen at different times. So you could see that my staff their skills have been enhanced, so that even after the project life cycle, my staff in the local government authority can continue working with the communities along similar lines. So there are a lot to say, but for now, for the sake of time, I will drop here for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Sane, for sharing these experiences from the Gambia. I think it's really, inspiring to see the actions happening at the community level. And now we know that after the contribution from the European Union, the government of the Gambia decided to take up these contributions. So now the government is using its own resources to channel those finances through this mechanism for local adaptation use the government system. So strengthening even further the capacity of local governments to become champions in addressing climate change at the local level. So thank you so much for sharing this. And I hear that Mr. Ndrema is on his way to here. As I said, he has just been appointed as the new LDC chair, so he's just attending that meeting where he's taking up the chairmanship, so he will be joining us soon. But I think for the sake of being democratic, I would propose that we open the panel for discussions and questions from the audience. So I don't know if anyone has any question before perhaps we move back to our panelists. Flemings?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Lafayette. I wanted to ask a small question on the video. Very good interventions that we are seeing from local and also being locally led. Just to learn, because I think as Malawi, this is our first time implementing local because we are still doing the pilot. And we are piloting in 3 districts in our country. And one of the critical aspects that we've observed from the previous similar interventions were the issue to do with what we call geotechnical investigations of the structures. So what has happened is that when the structures are done, because they're not climate-proofed, as a result, when you receive more than normal rainfall, you find that the structures are washed away. So looking at those particular structures, I'm not sure, just to learn so that we can also borrow a leaf from you. Was a geotechnical investigation undertaken on that particular bridge so that you build a resilient bridge? So if you receive more than normal rainfall, the structures can still stand? I just want to learn from Gambia. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Mr. Sani, would like to address?
Thank you. I think that is a wonderful question. I think that is a very good question. Talking about resilience and talking about sustainability. I am sure when we do the work, it's not one party that does the work. There is what we call the MDFTs. MDFTs means multidisciplinary facilitation team. And this is comprised of stakeholders from different institutions that have competence in different areas. We serve as the government at the level, at the local level, but we have other actors that do their other jobs. Like you have the NEA, National Environment Agency, involved. You have the community development. Some of these stakeholders talking are the ones who participate, but there are others who are behind. And each of them do their work to make sure that the project is implemented and it becomes a sustainable and resilient project. So I think by your question, that assessment or survey must have been done adequately before the implementation of the project. And it doesn't stop there. Even the identification of the contractors, we do the due diligence to make sure that whatever is done to stand the test of time. Thank you. I hope I answer your question.
Thank you so much. Please.
Thank you very much for your deliberation so far. I'm just concerned about the issue you raised, livelihood, because you indicated that some of the funding goes to helping these young people and women, and I just wanted to know, when the project expired, what happened? I mean, the government cannot afford to continue giving them the staffing that they were doing during the project period. So what happens to them? Is it some form of livelihood that is done, and what can be done to ensure that local projects are kind of really sustainable, so that the community themselves get something afterward? Thank you.
Yeah, as the case may be, as you've said, like the beneficiaries of the project intervention in terms of cash for work, we call it cash for work. It is not a permanent employment, I'm sure you understand. It is going to be for the period of the intervention of the project that is presented. But what I'm saying is, during the process, they are exposed to learning skills that they may live with for the rest of their lives. So they can use those skills to even earn living from that after the project. But again, as well, that would open a door to encourage them to learn, to improve on those skills that they primarily have begun from that end. But again, government also could use the same opportunity as they have participated in this project to identify them to benefit from other interventions. In terms of what you said, apart from having government at the central level, there is the local level government, of which I head. And then we take stock of this implementation, these project implementations, and we follow them up. The participants in the project will adequately be dated, will be put into data, and they will be with us. I'm sure the local itself is very good in following up and putting in record what projects are implemented, who participated in the project. And those reports are shared with my office. And then we use that to even on a follow-up, if we would need some other young people to involve in other skill areas or contractor or whoever. And I should say this even, mostly we are biased to identifying contractors. We try as much as possible to source contractors from within so that the benefit would still stay. And like you said, the livelihood enhancement will also be in the process be realized. So in essence, the young people, the women, have all a percentage to participate in the process. But then it's documented, and we can, as a follow-up, when government commit more funds, use the same young people who got, like, okay, I'll give you a story, a case. We currently are constructing, or the construction is done, a hospitality training center for young people. So some of the project beneficiaries of previous projects that participated and got some skills, the making of bricks and other areas of that construction, they were sourced from those previous beneficiaries of the local project. So it's like you become partners and stakeholders now. So we live with those young people and women beneficiaries, either at the community level or at the LGA level. LGA, I mean local government authority level.
Thanks so much for the question, for the response. Yeah, another question there.
Thank you very much. My chairman, he's my chairman. I'm from the Gambia, the same region. So thanks for the discussion. I just have a question. I like this model of local because if you think about local resilience, interventions at the local national adaptation plans, national development plans. Okay, there are things that cuts across local regional issues that national priorities can focus on. But what examples are there in the Gambia, in Malawi, or in Liberia, where we see a nice mainstreaming or integration of local strategies or plans into national plans? This way they speak to each other. And I think that I would love to hear if there are strategic documents in place at your country level where local government councils are working directly with various departments and ministries, like strongly, you know what I mean? So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. Actually, it was one of the questions that I also wanted to ask them. So that's very good that you ask them, because we know that there are several initiatives happening, but as you said, how these, whatever is happening at the local level can inform the nationally agreed goals. Perhaps with Jeff, if you would like to share also first, and then we move to Latin.
All right, thank you for that very beautiful question. When you speak and say local adaptive mechanisms, it means we change our engagement process from tap to baton to tap. If you follow the video the German display associated with her explanation, the idea I'm generating is whatever is done by the direct affected people is sustainable because they use their local idea and methodology. We didn't need to go across the street to look for another engineer to come and help them because they did it. They know how they did it, and they can always go back to get it done if it didn't work. That's one thing. In most of our countries, like my brother asked the question about sustainability, the reason why most intervention projects are failing is because they are not determined by the people who are supposed to be declared as beneficiaries. So transfer projects are more or less not really generating the kind of momentum or the resilience that we anticipate. So in many of our countries now, the reason why many of our countries are supporting the UNCDF is because the localized idea, utilizing what has previously been overlooked. You know, we actually thought that local capacities are weak because I'm telling you that in my country, 20 years of civil war, we went to the extent of even going to the community to build latrines when they were not used to using latrines in the places where we constructed them. So some of those latrines were never touched. Just how we built them, that's where they remain. But if you went to the community and asked them, some people like to go in a latrine, but they want it outside of the town because they believe in privacy. So we went as intervening agencies, we didn't consider their privacy. We just said, look, this town need 4 latrines, build one there, and you build it, you give the key to them, they clap, you leave, nobody uses it. You see, so when it's localized, when you have this kind of consultative meetings cutting across, sit with the community, let them determine what is good for them, your intervention is definitely going to be sustainable. So in Liberia, some of our national development plans, like I spoke of the NDC, we did our INDC, we did not capture most of the voices of people who we thought should be the direct affected and will be beneficiaries. So we changed our engagement process. We went from clan to district, and then we came national. So if you go to the clan level now and sit down to discuss Liberia, NDC, you'll find people there who will be able to tell you, oh, I participated in a meeting that had to do with the agricultural sector, or I participated in a meeting. Because I tell you one thing, my country is a very small country. We have about 5 million human beings in the whole country. But 30% of that country have access to electricity, 70% no. And even the 30%, the electricity supply is sporadic. So when we went for consultation, you ask the people, what do we do? The idea was not to tell the government to say, build more hydro plants in Mosrado County and farming, because transmission and distribution alone, forget about it. The government don't have money to build. What's about transmission and distribution, which is one of the most difficult aspects of power supply? So 90% of the people you talk to, they will tell you, they have flashlights that go around from China all over the place now. You pull it in the sun in the evening, you use it. So they tell you if you bring this, you know, so that kind of mechanism are helping us to change our development engagement. Instead of telling the people what we think is good for them, we are asking them to tell us now what is good for them. And once we take that approach, everything that you do in that community is fully owned. It has legitimate ownership. It has the required consensus for managing it, and then the sustainability becomes very, very adequate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Mr. Landin?
Yeah, thank you. I think that is a good question. I believe the Gambia already has an NDC, and the NDC and Gambia National Development Plan probably would not be, they would be speaking to each other. Is one and the same, which is very important at the national level. So in order to maintain the legacy of both documents, or the existence of both documents, the same transcend or drops down to the local levels. In my own area, we have what we call the Mansakonko Area Council Strategic Development Plan. And that strategic development plan is basically channeled through the National Development Plan, which I'm sure is linked to many other frameworks or development agendas. So you would see our strategic plan will actually respond to the national level priorities, or it will correspond to the national level priorities, and that will drop down to the local level. Notwithstanding, the development of the national and our strategic plan all were highly consultative. Like the development of our strategic plan at the level of my council has to engage the village development committees. If you understand, the structure, the institutional structure of the area councils is like you have the LGA, local government authority at the decentralized level, then down we have the ward development committees, and at the level of the communities we have the village development committees. So the consultation for developing the strategic plan and other priority documents involve all these tiers, which at the end of the day will have to correspond with the national priorities, particularly in this case in terms of climate and climate issues. So that is the operation in place right now.
Thank you so much. Maybe just to complement here, maybe from my side, yeah, because I believe that adaptation needs to be contextualized, so we cannot analyze this in a standalone kind of context. So it needs to be contextualized somehow, and also happen in the development context, because there's this discussion around separation between what is development, what is adaptation, but somehow the issue of mainstreaming also climate change concerns in development, they need to go hand in hand, because as Jeff mentioned here, I mean the context where mechanisms like local operate, they're starting from zero. So we also need to take that into account as we implement this kind of mechanism. Perhaps they will not be the best quality in the first years, but as they implement every year, the idea would be also to encourage improvements in performance, in the quality of the investments, and because this model also uses performance-based grants, where each year there is independent assessments which take place, and local governments are then encouraged to improve performance along those areas. Any other question? I saw a hand raised here.
Not directly to the panelists, but to the UNCDF. I'm Shirin from Bangladesh. So I'm just wondering, does local has any intervention in Bangladesh?
Yes. Yes, so maybe we take another question and then I'll respond. Okay.
Yeah, not necessarily a question. Basically, what I wanted to say is basically what you have highlighted already. But just to echo what Gambia said. So like Gambia, Malawi also has the planning documents at that local level. So we start from the village level. We have village action plans. So all the villages within that particular district have the village action plans, which consolidate into a district development plan, meaning that the development of those plans at that local level are taking into account the views of the people down there. But these documents are living documents, are reviewed regularly. So to take into account emerging issues, like you have highlighted in terms of issues of environment being contextualized in terms of how emerging issues are coming. So you can review those documents to take into account new developments that are coming. But these are already embedded in these documents that are developed from the lower level up to the district level. And what we have done is to digitize those documents, because there are so many. If you look at a district, they may have 200 villages, and to have 200 papers, it becomes difficult. So I've digitized those so that they are easily accessible, they can easily refer to it, and they can easily open it by just filtering by a village and see what exactly that village prioritized as their issues, and then they can implement. If they want to modify, then they can modify based on the experiences at that particular level. So yes, indeed, these issues are contextualized based on the outcomes at that particular age.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Just to respond very quickly, because I also would like to acknowledge the arrival here of Mr. Jerwa, who I'm going to invite to sit here also to the chair. So Local is also in Bangladesh. It's already in the second phase of implementation, covering some 72 local governments in the country, but it's under the name of Logic. So it has been somehow a different name, but we can maybe have another discussion so we can... Yeah, it's co-implemented by UNCDF and UNDP with different funding streams. UNDP most focuses on CSOs funding, and then using this mechanism, performance-based grants, for transferring or channeling those grants to the local governments. Ah, right, yes. Yes, because it's being somehow rebranded as Logic. Some countries, they do that for, yeah. So actually, it's a joint implementation. Thanks for the question. So I would like to, because we have now, yeah, so 8 minutes, but I would like to acknowledge the arrival here of Mr. Janwa and also congratulate you for the chairmanship of the LDC group. Congratulations. We wish to work also very close with you going forward. So I would like to invite you to sit here with the other panelists, please. Can you also have a round of applause to Mr. Evans? Thank you. Thank you so much for, I know that the schedule is very busy, especially in these last days of COP. So thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. So just, yeah, before we close, we would like to perhaps hear from you, because we know that Malawi has embarked in the, in the NAP process. So it's in the process now of developing its national adaptation plan. And what do you think are the biggest challenges in terms of scaling up climate action that will support NAP implementation, but also the NDCs, especially as we think about, the revision which is due for 2025 of the NDCs, and how do you see your government bridging these gaps in terms of, bringing more local adaptation, finance for locally led adaptation? Over to you. Oh,
sorry. Thank you very much, moderator Rafael, and greetings to my co-panelists, but also the audience. Good afternoon. It's quite a good question to ask. We do recognize that as we are sitting here, we have spent, some of us now, closer to 3 weeks. From where I'm coming from now, where I was given the position of chair, I've told my colleagues that we are here representing people that are vulnerable back home. Some of them are voiceless. In fact, most of them, the majority, are voiceless, and we're here to speak on their behalf. These people have experienced extensive adverse impacts of climate change, and they need support. And this support must be quick so that they are able to address their livelihoods, earn an income, earn food security. They must be food secure, have potable water. They must have good energy to sustain their needs, lighting, cooking, etc. Now, when you come to development of adaptation plans and projects, like as you mentioned, the national adaptation plans, yes, Malawi has been developing its NAP for now, maybe close to 3 years or so, or maybe more. We have not concluded it yet. I think the key challenges could be, one, maybe availability of data and information that would justify the formulation of the NAP itself, because it has to be to have evidence of data regarding vulnerabilities, the exposure to the impacts, but also when you do the cost estimates or the investment cost, I think that must be justified as to why you need X billion or million of dollars to implement that. So that, I think, is one challenge. The second challenge is, I think, of course, the project cycle, the way it takes to move from point A to point B to point C to have your adaptation plan supported. I think that's another challenge. We need to have a way to reduce the cycle of project formulation and implementation. I think last week I was in a meeting where I talked about if we could have a way, maybe it was in fact in this same room when we met for the other event last week, when I said that it was about the NDC itself, and now we have the National Adaptation Plan, then we have the NDCs. Now you spend 3-4 years formulating your NAP, 3-4 years maybe formulating your NDCs, and then you spend another 2-3 years to just come up with one project that can go on the ground. Why don't we just decide to implement the NAP as it is, implement the NDC as it is? Because you have already worked on it, but then you have to go through another process. So you spend 6, 7, 8 years just to get a project and then to support the vulnerable communities. Meanwhile, they have been food insecure, they have lost their property, they have been exposed to vulnerabilities, the impacts like what happened in Malawi this year, the cyclone Freddy, tropical one, it was very bad. So we need to reduce those cycles, and also I think the data, that we would be using, I think there's evidence, the indigenous people have evidence of what is a shock, what is an adverse impact, so they know. But then you would want to go into books and then dig out data to produce as evidence. I think that's a challenge. So to summarize and conclude, we'll be calling for, I think, expedited processes of concluding both the plans, the NDC and also the NAP, but also if we can have quick ways of coming up with the projects that can be funded and then get implemented on the ground, so that we sustain the lives of the vulnerable communities and also sustain the ecosystems, and therefore contribute to economic development, poverty eradication, human well-being, all those linked together. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing your experience and reflections on this. And we were discussing previously also the issue of access requirements, the need for simplification of access to climate finance, and how mechanisms which are readily available, tested and tried, like the local and the performance-based climate resilience grants, could be used as a channel to really simplify access requirements. Because when we talk about, as you mentioned, local adaptation, also Jeff shared some experience, when on adaptation plans, by the time you get access to the funds, perhaps the plans have changed, people have moved, so you have to start from scratch, basically. So we need simplification, I totally agree. Unfortunately, I think we have 1 minute left, so I don't know if we maybe can have one question if the colleagues from the NDC partnership would allow, or is there any specific question that we would like to address to Mr. Jerma, perhaps, before we close? I think we have only one, so yeah, please.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask you in particularly about the NAP, because Bangladesh, we just have finalized the NAP, and when you were doing it, what are the how you are engaging with the women, in particular women and youth, in the NAP formulation process, and also for maybe some of you can also in response that in local, how you are engaging with the women in decision making, and also bringing solution not as only as a beneficiary to receive the service. So in terms of gender equality or integrating women in all the process, how you are doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps in 30 seconds, if it's possible.
12 seconds. Thank you very much to Bangladesh. In fact, I thought it was Bhutan, but Bangladesh, yeah. So what we've done is, in the formulation of our national adaptation plans, the NDC, but also the LACAO, facility project that we have identified at least three communities, 3 areas that we'll invest in, and in those areas we have strategically targeted the gender component, so number of women to be supported, to benefit from there, the number of youth, and so the plans that we have developed have that disaggregation already. We have also gone through what we call our National Youth Network on Climate Change, and they are represented here at the COP, but also our Civil Society Network on Climate Change, composition of civil society organizations and NGOs. They're also present here, and we have integrated them in the system Going to the councils, the communities, we have also targeted those particular vulnerable groups so that they can benefit from here. But not stopping only there, would want particularly the women, because quite a good majority, a good percentage of households in Malawi are also headed by females. So they're female headed. Some of them, they're orphaned, so it's the youth that are heading those families. So would want this to be the core beneficiaries and then own the resources and the benefits as it may be. Thank you.
Thank you so much for keeping the time. So I'm afraid we have reached the top of the hour in the end of this session, but I would like to thank our panelists for the participation and also for your active engagement during the session. And thank you so much. And yeah, have a nice day. Thank you. Can we take a picture?